help me, honey.
Stand up gently.
A billionaire in a blood-soaked tux collapsed in front of her van, right beside her sleeping triplets. Amelia had two choices: drive away and live, or pull him in and risk everything. She chose wrong. By sunrise, she wouldn't just be a single mother, she'd be the most hunted woman in America. Amelia tightened her grip on the steering wheel. Tonight's shift had been brutal, and the gas light had been blinking for miles. Just a little further, she prayed. Then, her headlights caught something ahead. A silver Aston Martin sat crooked across the road, headlights dimmed, steam rising in pale ribbons from its crushed hood. The passenger door hung open. Every instinct in Amelia's body screamed danger, but something else, something stronger, forced her to slow. As the van rolled to a stop, she saw him. A man staggered along the guardrail, one hand pressed to his head, blood glistening between his fingers. His expensive suit was torn, his steps unsteady. He looked powerful even in pain, like someone who wasn't used to losing control. Amelia's heartbeat thundered. She glanced at her children, then back at the stranger. He collapsed. In that instant, fear vanished. She threw open her door and rushed to him, catching his fall with her bare arms. "I can't breathe," he gasped. "You're going to be okay," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm building inside her. "I won't let you die here." She didn't know his name. She didn't know his story. But as she lifted him into the seat beside her sleeping children and pressed her foot to the gas pedal, she felt it deep in her bones. Tonight was not a coincidence. It was the night destiny found them all. And by morning, nothing in Amelia Carter's world would ever be the same. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. She had rescued a stranger with no idea he was Alexander Ward, the most powerful billionaire in the country, and the man who would soon change everything she believed about fate, love, and second chances. A faint beeping sound echoed in the air. Alexander's eyes fluttered open to a hazy ceiling fan turning above him. The sterile scent of antiseptic mixed with something softer, baby powder. His vision cleared, and the first thing he saw wasn't nurses or bodyguards or cutting-edge machines he was accustomed to. It was a woman. Amelia sat in a plastic chair, hair loose from exhaustion, gently rocking a baby in her arms while feeding another in a carrier strapped to her chest. A third infant slept in a makeshift crib fashioned out of hospital pillows. Her movements were slow, careful, as though every ounce of her strength was being poured into the small lives in her care. Alexander blinked. This wasn't his private hospital in Manhattan. There were no marble floors, no security teams. Instead, faded curtains fluttered in the open window, and a single nurse at the desk hummed quietly to herself. "What happened?" His voice was rough. Amelia's head snapped up. Their eyes met, hers cautious, his disoriented. Before she could speak, the nurse entered with a clipboard. "Mr. Ward, you're lucky to be alive. Your car collided with debris from last night's storm. This woman brought you in, carried you from the vehicle while holding all three of her babies." Alexander turned sharply, stunned. He studied Amelia, truly seeing her now, not as a stranger, but as a mystery. A single mother who had lifted him from wreckage with a strength that defied logic. Amelia looked away, embarrassed. "You're awake. That's what matters," she said quietly, adjusting the baby in her arms. He tried to sit up. Pain shot through his ribs. "You saved me," he said, disbelief lacing every word. Amelia shrugged. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," he replied, voice firm despite his weakness. "They wouldn't." For a moment, silence stretched between them, charged, unfamiliar. Something inside Alexander shifted, an emotion he couldn't name rising in his chest. He opened his mouth to ask her name, but Amelia had already risen, gently handing a bottle to the nurse.
"I should go," she murmured. "My children need rest."
"And you don't?" the nurse said softly. Amelia offered a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. She gathered her things, lifting one sleepy baby to her shoulder. As she reached the door, she paused. "Take care of yourself," she whispered without looking back. The door closed. Alexander stared after her, pulse steadying with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. A moment later, his phone vibrated on the bedside table. His assistant's voice came through the speaker, panicked. "Sir, you've been missing for hours. We're sending a helicopter immediately." Alexander interrupted, his tone icy and precise, yet something new fueled his words. "Find her," he ordered. "The woman with the 3 babies. I want her name, her address, everything. Immediately." This wasn't gratitude. This was destiny beginning to take shape. The morning sun filtered weakly through the thin curtains of Amelia's farmhouse, casting pale light across peeling walls and scattered baby toys. The old heater clicked twice before giving up again. Amelia stood at the kitchen counter, staring into a nearly empty cupboard. 3 cans of formula left. Not enough to last the week. A sharp knock shattered the silence. She stiffened. Before she could move, another knock. Firmer, deliberate. Amelia gently set down the baby in her arms and approached the window. Her breath caught. 3 black SUVs lined her dirt driveway. Glossy, imposing, nothing that belonged on this forgotten stretch of farmland. The engines hummed like sleeping beasts.
"Please, not the landlord again,"
she whispered, heart pounding. But when the doors opened, it wasn't her landlord, or any face she recognized. It was him. Alexander Ward stepped out with a steady gait, dressed simply in a dark coat, no entourage of assistants crowding him. Despite the faint bruise still visible near his temple, his presence was calm. Not commanding, but respectful, intentional. Amelia opened the door only halfway. "You shouldn't be here," she said, clutching the frame as though it were armor. Alexander paused, eyes taking in the house, the quiet, the signs of struggle. But he didn't look pitying, he looked present, focused. "I came to thank you properly," he said, "and to repay you." She shook her head. "Repayment implies a transaction. That night wasn't one." "You risked your life," he insisted. "You carried me. You could have driven past like everyone else. You saved me, and I don't let debts go unanswered." Amelia's jaw tightened. "I didn't save you for money." The words hung in the air, sharp, honest, unshakable. Something flickered in Alexander's eyes. Not offense. Fascination. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then why? Most people freeze when they see danger. You ran toward it." Amelia swallowed, glancing back at the babies now stirring in their crib. "Because my children will grow up in a world full of indifference. I want them to see me choose compassion, even when no one's watching." Silence stretched. And then, Alexander exhaled, a breath that seemed to loosen something inside him. "I see," he murmured. He didn't reach for his wallet. He didn't offer a check. Instead, he stepped back with the quiet certainty of a man who had just made a decision. "Thank you for your honesty, Amelia," he said softly, now speaking her name for the first time. She blinked, surprised he'd discovered it. He turned toward the SUVs. The engines came alive, but Amelia felt it before he even moved, an invisible tether now tied between them. At the foot of her worn-out steps, Alexander paused. His expression had shifted, not polite, not businesslike, determined. He would not walk away. 3 days passed in silence. Amelia convinced herself he was gone for good. back to his world of glass towers and private jets. The memory of his eyes, steady and unreadable, lingered longer than she liked to admit. That morning, the triplets were unusually fussy, and Amelia rocked them gently near the fireplace when a rumble echoed outside. She stood quickly. Not one, but 4 black vehicles rolled into view, sleek, purposeful, gliding over the dirt road like shadows. Her stomach twisted. The front door opened before she could reach it. Alexander stepped in, not with a briefcase of money, but with 2 lawyers, a dark leather folder, and a look that made the room still. "I didn't come to offer you charity," he began. "I came to offer you purpose." Amelia's eyes narrowed. "Purpose?" He nodded, placing the folder gently on the table. "A foundation, fully funded, created to support and empower single mothers. Women who were abandoned, dismissed, forgotten. I want you to lead it." She blinked. "Me?" "You are the exact person this foundation is meant to represent," Alexander said. "Not from a boardroom, from real life. You've survived what many don't. You understand struggle and dignity." Amelia's throat tightened. The idea was impossible, irrational, tempting. "I'm not qualified," she whispered. Alexander's gaze softened. "You are the most qualified person I've ever met." One of the babies, as if responding, reached out a tiny hand toward Alexander. Reflexively, he stepped forward and let the infant wrap its fingers around his thumb. His expression shifted, frozen in something like awe. The room grew quiet. Even the lawyers seemed to fade into the background. "This isn't pity, Amelia," he said quietly. "This is partnership. I don't want to save you. I want to build something with you." Her heart thudded. Independence had been her armor for so long. Accepting this would change everything. Could she trust a man like him, a man who had lived a life untouched by hunger and exhaustion, to understand hers? She looked at her children, triplets, born into struggle they never chose. She thought about the empty cupboards, and the small flame of hope that had flickered since the night she saved him. "What if I fail?" she finally asked. Alexander leaned in, his voice steady as stone. "Then I'll fail with you, but I won't let you fall." The words stunned her more than any offer of money ever could. With a slow, trembling breath, Amelia nodded, not in agreement, but in permission for the possibility. "Temporary," she said. "I'll try it. Temporarily." Alexander didn't smile, but his eyes answered for him. Temporary was merely the beginning. The iron gates of the Ward estate opened slowly, silent and imposing as they stretched wide to accept Amelia's van. She clutched the steering wheel with damp palms, her pulse thundering in her throat. On either side of the road, manicured gardens rolled out like something from a dream, fountains dancing in the morning light, marble statues glimmering beneath glass domes. This was not her world. Ahead, Alexander's mansion rose like a palace, steel, stone, light, designed to be untouchable. She swallowed hard. "It's temporary," she whispered to herself. "I'm here to work, nothing more." Inside, staff stood waiting. Perfect posture, neutral expressions. But their eyes told a different story. Confusion, judgment, curiosity edged with disbelief. A single mother of triplets, in the home of the most private billionaire in America. Whispers began immediately. Is she the reason he disappeared? Did she manipulate him? Does he really think she can run a foundation? Alexander arrived just as a baby started to cry. Without hesitation, Amelia lifted her child and soothed her with gentle sways, all while signing paperwork his legal counsel explained. She was answering questions about strategic planning while burping an infant over her shoulder. Alexander watched from across the room, silent, observant. His board members weren't so silent. "This is highly unconventional," one executive said sharply. "With respect, Mr. Ward, the media is already speculating. They're calling this a sympathy stunt." "And some are asking," another added carefully, "if this woman is being positioned for more personal involvement." The words hung in the air like poison. Amelia's chest tightened. Her instinct screamed to flee, to protect her children from worlds that would never welcome them.
"I think this was a mistake," she said quietly, rising. "I shouldn't be here."
But before she could take a step, Alexander's voice cut through the room. "This woman," he said, every word deliberate, "saved my life when no one else stopped. She will not be questioned. She will not be disrespected. And if anyone here has an issue with that, they can leave." Silence fell. Not one person moved. Alexander turned, meeting Amelia's stunned gaze. For the first time, the mask of indifference slipped, and she saw something real. Not just gratitude, conviction. In that moment, Amelia realized this wasn't charity. He wasn't shielding her. He was choosing her. And that terrified her more than anything. The evening settled gently over the Ward estate, casting golden light through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Amelia sat in the quiet sitting room, rocking one of the triplets to sleep, while the other two played on a plush rug nearby. For once, the silence wasn't heavy. It was warm. Alexander entered without his usual guarded presence. No suit jacket, sleeves rolled. A man, not a billionaire. He stopped when he saw Amelia humming softly to her daughter. "You have a way of calming any storm," he said quietly. She looked up, surprised. "Storms don't disappear," she replied gently. "You just learn to breathe through them." He stepped closer, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. For a moment, neither spoke. The intimacy was not loud. It was the kind that lived in breath and heartbeat. Finally, he exhaled. "I used to believe trust was a weakness, that people only drew close when they wanted something from me." Amelia listened, eyes soft. "My business partner, my closest friend, sold me out in a deal worth billions," Alexander continued, staring into the dim light. "He nearly destroyed everything I built. From that day, I decided no one gets close enough to hurt me again." Amelia lowered her gaze. "The father of my children promised forever," she said, voice steady, though her hands trembled. "But when he learned I was carrying triplets, he walked away, said it was too much, too costly, too real." Alexander turned sharply, jaw tense with restrained emotion. "He left you to do this alone?" "He left before they were born," she said softly. Silence wrapped around them, heavy, vulnerable, shared. Alexander knelt beside the child playing at Amelia's feet. The little girl looked up, smile wide, cheeks full of innocence. "Dada?" she said suddenly, reaching her tiny arms toward him. The room froze. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. Alexander's eyes widened, not in shock, but in something deeper, something breaking, something awakening. He didn't correct her. He didn't step back. Instead, with a softness that stunned even himself, he gathered the little girl into his arms. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. In that moment, both understood. Something had shifted. Not out of charity, not out of obligation, out of love quietly being born. It started with a headline. Billionaire Alexander Ward secretly funding his mistress and her triplets. Within hours, it was everywhere. Talk shows, gossip blogs, financial news. Pictures of Amelia stepping out of his home with the babies were plastered across the internet. Every moment twisted into a scandalous narrative. Then came the stock market response. Ward Global shares plunged. Board members demanded explanations. Phones rang without pause. Alexander's legal team flooded into his office, voices sharp and urgent. "If you don't issue a statement distancing yourself from this woman," one shareholder snapped, "you could lose majority control of the company." "She is not a liability," Alexander said coldly, his voice low, his restraint trembling. But they didn't see Amelia, the brave woman who saved his life. They saw only headlines, rumors, weakness to exploit. Meanwhile, Amelia sat in her room, clutching her phone as hateful messages flooded in. Gold digger, welfare queen, baby trapper. Some messages were worse, much worse. Threats aimed at her children. Paparazzi camped outside the gates, shouting her name, begging for a reaction. Camera flashes pierced through the windows even at night. One of the babies awoke, crying uncontrollably, terrified by the noise. That was when she broke. Tears streaming, Amelia began packing a small bag, formula, diapers, a few clothes. Her hands shook so badly she dropped a bottle. It rolled across the floor as though marking the end of something sacred. Alexander entered the nursery just as she lifted the first baby into her arms. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm leaving," she said, not turning toward him. "My children are being hunted, Alexander. I won't let them grow up in a war zone." "You think this is your burden alone?" He stepped forward. "They're my responsibility too now." She turned then, eyes red but voice firm. "No, they're my responsibility. I won't let your world destroy them." Alexander's face hardened, a battle raging behind his eyes. "This is no coincidence," he said slowly. "The articles, the photos, the timing of the crash, someone orchestrated this." She frowned. "What are you talking about?" He looked at her then, not as a businessman, not even as a man in love, but as a man who had finally connected the final piece of a dangerous puzzle. "My stepbrother," he said, voice darkening. "The man who was cut out of the Ward inheritance. He caused my crash to begin with." Amelia froze, realization dawning through fear. Alexander stepped closer, a quiet vow burning in his gaze. "He started this war," Alexander whispered, "and I'm going to end it." Alexander didn't wait. Within hours, he stormed the Ward Global Executive Chamber where his stepbrother, Damien Ward, sat among shareholders, smug and composed. Cameras swiveled as Alexander burst in, eyes blazing. "This is your doing," Alexander said, throwing down a thick folder of evidence. Security footage. Bank transactions. A hired team caught planting a tracker in his Aston Martin weeks before the crash. Damien's smirk cracked. "You tried to kill me," Alexander said, voice steady, lethal. "And when that failed, you targeted the woman who saved me, because you knew I would protect her." Murders of whispers erupted across the room. Damien's face drained of color as guards stepped forward. Alexander didn't look back. Justice was in motion. Meanwhile, Amelia was already gone. She drove the familiar country road toward her old town, babies bundled beside her. But as soon as she arrived, doors slammed. Neighbors who once pitied her now glared with contempt. "She trapped him," one woman shouted. "She's the reason our town's on the news." Someone hurled a rock at her van. Amelia's hands trembled on the wheel. Tears blurred her vision. She never felt more alone. Then, a roar of engines. Black SUVs surrounded the town square as Alexander stepped out, not in armor, but in truth. People fell silent. He walked straight to Amelia, who stood frozen beside her van, clutching her crying child. Without hesitation, Alexander took the baby into his arms, soothing him gently. Then he turned to the crowd, voice amplified with unshakable certainty. "You call her a manipulator?" he said slowly. She is the reason I am alive. She is the reason this town is on the map. And if you believe rumors over truth, then hear it from me now. Amelia Carter saved not just my life, she saved my soul. The crowd shifted, uneasy. She owes me nothing, Alexander continued. It is I who owe her everything. And if defending her means losing my company, my empire, my name, then I will walk away gladly. The world stood still. Amelia's chest rose with a shaky breath as he turned to her, eyes raw, voice softening. I choose you, he said simply. You and the babies, with or without the world's approval. The moment hung suspended in the air, holy, unbreakable. And for the first time in her life, Amelia didn't feel like she was running. She felt chosen, protected, loved. Not as charity, but as destiny. The grand hall was not filled with billionaires and celebrities. It was filled with single mothers, women who once stood exactly where Amelia had stood, tired, unseen, surviving one breath at a time. Today, they stood not as spectators, but as witnesses to a miracle that was theirs as much as hers. The banner above the stage read, "The Ward Carter Foundation for Single Mothers. Hope begins here." Amelia stepped forward, three little hands clinging to her dress. The triplets giggled, their laughter echoing through the hall like sunlight breaking through clouds. Alexander stood beside them. No suit, no tie. Just a man reborn through love. As applause filled the room, Alexander reached into his jacket pocket. But instead of velvet, he held a simple white envelope. A hush fell. He knelt, not in front of Amelia alone, but in front of the triplets, who stared with wide, curious eyes. I don't want to just be the man who builds a foundation in your name, he said softly. I want to be your family. He opened the envelope and handed it to Amelia. Her breath caught. Legal adoption documents, his name signed beneath theirs. I'm not offering diamonds, Alexander said, voice trembling with truth. I'm offering my name, my protection, my love, for them, for you, forever. Tears streamed down Amelia's face as the triplets crawled into his arms one by one, as if they already knew the answer written in their hearts. The crowd stood, cheering, crying, holding their children tighter. Moments later, beneath an arch of wildflowers crafted by the mothers from the shelter she once lived in, Amelia and Alexander exchanged vows. No gold, no extravagance, just two souls who found home in each other's brokenness. As she stood there, once a forgotten woman on a dark road, now a bride surrounded by the family she never thought she'd have, Amelia realized it had never been about saving him. It had always been about finding the place her heart had been searching for all along. Final message. She rescued him from death that night, but he rescued her from a life of being unseen. Love, not wealth, changed everything. Thank you for watching to the end. I believe you enjoyed it. We have a lot of other interesting stories like this lined up for you already, so click the image showing on your screen to watch the next.